What's up, Bucs fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Pirate Parlay podcast here on the Sick Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, JC Allen. We're going to be talking about a bunch of new moves the Bucs made. One of them, Mike Evans, Buck for life. He's back in the building. That's right. We'll break down that contract, the ins and outs. We'll look at Antoine Winfield Jr., who was slapped with the franchise tag. But there's more to that than meets the eye. Baker Mayfield, what's the latest on him? Some of the numbers we're hearing are outlandish, and we'll break down all those things. But what about the rest of the Bucs free agents? Levante David, Chase Edmonds, Chase McLaughlin, some of these other guys who they probably want to have back, but are kind of lesser down the priority hole. And then we'll also talk about some of the upcoming free agents. I'll list me and my guests will both list 3 free agents we think would be great fits for the Bucs. We're going to have River Wells, newly of BucsGameday. Very excited to have him on as a managing editor. He's going to be helping us pump out a ton of content over there. If you haven't been watching BucsGameday, Sports Illustrated, I've been doing my free agency breakdown. We had defensive linemen posted yesterday. Today we'll have linebackers outside and inside both posted. And I'm also working on my mock off season that should be out Friday, hopefully. And we'll have all that wrapped up for you guys there too. So stick around. On the other side, we'll be right back and we'll bring it all to you, break it all down.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Pirate Parlay.
Battle intercepted, picked off in the end zone. Bucs are going to beat the Chiefs. We're the champions of the world.
The sickest Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. It's going to be sick.
What is up here? Back on the other side. Let me waste no time bringing my newest colleague, River Wells, who is now a member of BucsGameday over at SI. River, welcome to have you in here. Welcome to the BucsGameday family. How the heck are you doing? Big news today, man.
Big news today, yeah. I'm really excited to be here. Really excited to be at BucsGameday. Getting to work and being able to continue my Bucs coverage with a lot of great guys over there at the network. So very excited.
Yeah, you're a
first
huge
assignment here.
Yeah, right. Huge addition to the team. First off, boots in the ground. Every day at the facility, every day, every game you were there. You went to a few away games. It's going to be such a big boost. Your editing skills, your managing skills. Super excited to have you, man. Don't have enough things to say about River. If you're not following River on Twitter X, we went through this every week, but where can they find you? Where can they find all your socials? And obviously, starting today, you can find all of his work over at BucsGameday on Sports Illustrated.
Right, yeah. First of all, I had a lot of great people over at the BucsWire and network and my writers. Did a great job over there. But I'm excited to jump on here, and you can find me at River Wells, or at River H Wells on Twitter. That's where I'll be posting, most of my coverage from there, live tweets, videos, stuff like that. So really excited to continue my coverage over there if you know me from there. And if not, I'll be at BucsGameday pumping out content, and you can find it all there.
It's going to be so much fun to have you on board. But let's jump right into some content. Mike Evans, Buck for life, trending that way at least. He signs a 2-year deal.
Absolutely.
Originally reported as a $52 million deal. Contract details came out, and his agent was embellishing a little bit. Not that he can't get there, but it'd be extremely difficult. They'll also have to win back-to-back Super Bowls to get that amount of money. What it really breaks down to is a 2-year, $41 million deal with $35 million guaranteed, and a lot of roster bonuses, incentives, some reachable, some kind of tough like that back-to-back Super Bowl. The genius of it, we'll get into the cap breakdown, how it worked. But what were your initial reactions? Getting Mike back. Listen, first of all, to the first contract amount at $26 million, and then when you found out it was really $20.5 million, what were your reactions to both of those?
Well, when I first heard 26, I thought what I'm sure a lot of people thought, which was that's a lot of money, for sure. And especially, it was good that it was a 2-year deal. I thought in 26, I figured he would command the bag in free agency. When I first heard that number, I was like, he got paid. He definitely got the bag. And then, of course, it came out how incentivized the contract was. And I'm, as always, very impressed with what the team was able to do with that contract. There's a lot of incentives that he'll definitely be able to hit, which is good for him. But it really allows us some flexibility in the salary cap. And I think it's a good deal for both sides in that, if Mike balls out, he gets his money. And the Bucs are able to save some money there and structure it in a way that's beneficial for the team. So great work from Jason Light. Mike Greenberg is always on that contract. I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great deal. Originally puts him at the fourth highest paid receiver, drops him down to the 12th after Pittman got the tag, and soon to drop even lower than that once, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, these guys start to get their contracts, Ayuk, etc. T. Higgins, he'll drop down that list, but I thought it was a masterclass at how to do a contract. Likely he'll probably get around 24 if he can hit with some of those likely to be earning roster bonus incentives. So even that's still a good deal for the team. I had around 23 and a half over 3 years. The 2 years is great because it allows you to, monitor if he has any decline. And if he has any decline, then, you know what you're dealing with and you don't have to shuffle around money or potentially have him be a cap casualty year 3. Now you can go back to the drawing board and say, okay, you're 32 years old, which he'll be turning 33 before the season, but and kind of renegotiate and go year to year like what they're doing with Levante. So I thought it was a great deal for them. The biggest thing though is the Wizards at Waverly Place or at $1 Place, Jackie Davidson, Mike Greenberg, and of course the closer Jason Light somehow managed to get his cap hit. And somehow, I mean, you can look at the numbers and find out how, but as I reported first, the $5.5 million in cap hit for this year allows them to do so much. Obviously, they still got their own free agents to sign, but the $5.5 million, getting it down there with the $23 million bonus, signing bonus, and then the $6 million bonus in 2025 that they're paying out first year to get to that $29 million in order to kind of restructure that deal to get it down to $5.5 million. They continue to shock and surprise me over there in the front office of the Buccaneers.
Absolutely. Love the Wizards of Waverly Place poll there. That's a great reference. We got a Russo family of our own in $1 Place. But yeah, it really, Greenberg and Light and that whole team have done so well in managing the cap over the past 2 years. And like you said, bringing that cap hit down to 5.5, and then there's a little bit of dead money there, but even still, you're able to really focus down that number and allow the team some flexibility and getting back some of its own free agents, possibly looking at some others in the market, which we'll talk about later. But when it comes to this sort of thing, very few rooms in the league, I think, can manage the cap so well. And you look at teams like the New Orleans Saints and some other teams that are really struggling in the long haul, and you get teams like the Bucs who, Tom Brady leaves an old roster, and here we are 2 years later. You get Mike Evans back, you still have some cap room to be competitive, and you're not buried for the future, which, depending on how the Baker Mayfield contract goes and the Winfield contract goes, we'll talk about that later. But for right now, looking really good, I think, on the cap side of things. And the structure of that Evans deal is just, at this point, kind of what Greenberg and Light and those guys over there do. So fantastic job.
Right. And as the cap keeps rising, those hits will be a little bit less. And in year 2, the good thing about year 2 is they can convert that roster bonus into a signing bonus and push more money. If they don't touch the contract, he only counts as about $13.5 million, I think it was, in dead cap hit in 2026. So that's like getting out of that deal incredibly sound. But to me, the biggest thing when I look at the way they structured this deal is they're not rebuilding, they're not retooling, they're getting ready to make a push. They were one or two plays away from going to the NFC Championship this year after an upset win over the Eagles and a really close game against the Lions that went down to the wire. So the way they structured it means they're trying to get their own guys back, and Jason Light said as much at the combine. If we can get our own guys back, it's that's a boat parade worthy in itself. But what jumps out is they're gonna be making a push. I don't know if they, don't expect them to go high profile splash free agents, maybe 1.5 ish. But for the most part, they are structuring this so they can bring everybody back and continue to compete in a downtrodden NFC South. And we'll see if that remains that way. Reports of Kirk Cousins maybe to Atlanta, kind of premature, but we'll see what happens there with that team. But that's what jumped out to me at that contract is that they're not stepping back, they're stepping forward, and they're going to try to compete. And it's going to start with Mike, and then it's going to start with bringing Baker back and the rest of the guys.
Yeah, I agree. Especially when you look at getting Mike back, trying to get Baker back, which I think is likely at this point, but we'll see where the money is on that one. And then with the franchise tag with Antoine Winfield Jr., they want to bring back a lot of their marquee free agents and try and keep some continuity going in this next season. And there will be a few players that they might not be able to retain on maybe some depth side of things and some other less expensive free agents, but I do agree that the core, if they get Baker back and Antoine Winfield back, will still be there, and they can definitely make a push if they shore up the depth, get some pieces here and there in free agency. Uh, like you said, the Falcons get Cousins, whatever. If certain teams in the NFC South do make some moves in free agency, we'll see what happens. But I think the Bucs are in a pretty good spot because when you look at it, a lot of continuity there, a lot of talented players, and similar coaching staff and scheme, except for the offense, of course, with Ian Cohen. But even he's very similar kind of to the system that David Dallas ran. So going to be interesting to see what happens in their mentality. But I do think you're right. I think they're trying to make a push. I think a little bit going into the next year or two, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, the first domino, Mike Evans back. The second domino, was that push to try to get Antoine Winfield Jr. back. Unfortunately, that didn't happen in the allotted time, so they had to slap the franchise tag on him. People that I've talked to close to the situation say they are continuing to talk and are getting closer on a deal. When that might be announced, you never know. We get the tampering period, and while he's technically, with the franchise tag, there's going to be things coming into his agent's office and saying, well, hey, we would have got offered this, if this, et cetera, XYZ. And the franchise tag can hurt too, because, especially when you're young and you're looking for a long-term deal, you're looking at that first year. Okay, this is what I'm making first year, which is 17.1. It's 20% of that. The second year, 40% of that. Third year. So agents like to say, okay, well, if you're going to franchise tag my guy 3 years, this is what he'd get guaranteed. So it kind of gets tricky. I think they'll meet in the middle. I know Antoine wants to get paid. He's one of these guys.
He deserves it.
He deserves it, but I don't think this is a hometown discount type of guy. You might structure it so they can have some wiggle room.
Yeah.
Get his cap hit down to like $9 million or so this year, but he's going to go after the Brinks truck. He wants it backed up to his front door to stay in Tampa. He's got no choice. But when you look at that deal, what happened last year with Jesse Bates, and he got, I think, $17 million, I want to say, in free agency from Atlanta, kind of reset that market. Obviously got Derwin James there too, based on percentage of the cap. Where ultimately do you think, what do you think Antoine's looking for? Do you think it's a 3-year deal to get back to free agency? Do you think he wants more of that long-term, comfortability and security in a 4-year deal? If you had to guess kind of where the hang-up is and what the dollar amount is, what would you think is kind of preventing this deal from already being done, signed away, and in the books?
That's a really good question. And I think if, like you said, 3 or 4 years would be nice. I think Antoine Winfield Jr. likes the organization, and obviously he played very good football with the Bucs last year, the best football he's played, and some of the best safety play I've seen in quite a long time. Great year for safeties last year with Bates and Hamilton, but he was a monster, and he was a game changer in many different ways. He affected games single-handedly by himself. So if he can continue to even play, 3/4 that speed, he's worth resetting the safety market. And you mentioned, Bates got around 17 or so with Atlanta, and he's going to want more than that for sure. I think he'll want to be one of those guys that can reset that market. And so it is in the Bucs' best interest to, if they want to lock him up long term, to get that done soon. Like you mentioned, even though he's on the tag, discussions are certainly still ongoing to try and make that happen. Because if you can get a chess piece like that, like he was last year, it's so invaluable to the defense. And Todd Bowles is a defensive coach, and he wants a guy like that as long as he can have him. So for sure, I think we'll see what happens. But I think he's going to want to do a similar sort of thing like Bates did last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that 2020 draft class, it doesn't look too good in the back end. None of those guys are still on the team with the dismissal of Keyshawn Vaughn. But if you look at those first 2 picks with Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr., two All-Pros.
Yeah. Fantastic class there to start. And then obviously it happened afterward, but the great start and the first two picks are invaluable.
Absolutely. So I think Antoine Winfield at this point, he deserves to be paid as the highest paid safety in the league. $20 million. I don't think is out of the realm of possibility. I don't think 20 and a half, 21 is probably what he's looking for. And kind of not only reset the safety market this year, but it's going to be difficult for guys to jump up that. Hamilton's probably the next one to kind of,
absolutely.
And I don't think he's up for an extension until next season. So, Antoine Winfield Jr., I have him, I think, at 4 for 82. So $20.5 million, 40 of it guaranteed. And, I'm working on my Bucs mock off season. That's what I have them re-signing him for, and $40 million guaranteed. So I think that's what he gets close to.
I think he'd be just fine with that. Yeah.
I think he'd be fine with that. I think that's what he gets close to, and I think the Bucs would take that as well, getting him to that $9 million cap hit. Speaking about cap hits and big contracts, Baker Mayfield is in the news. Obviously, again, Scott Reynolds over at Pewter Report, my old stomping grounds, reported today that what he's heard from rumors is that the Bucs and Baker are pretty far apart. I would say about $19 million far apart. The Bucs came in with that Geno Smith type of deal, 3 for 75. Baker's camp came in with no, we want $44 million a year. We talked about this in the group chat Discord. Daniel Jones just broke the market.
He really did, didn't he? That was a bit of a misstep there on New York's part.
Not good by the New York's front office. I don't know what they were thinking. But Baker Mayfield, $44 million quarterback or not?
If I were the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which I am not, and Baker Mayfield's agent said we want $44 million a year, I would tell him that he could bake somewhere else, because at that point, Baker did a lot of really, really good things last year, and I think overall many of us were very impressed with what he was able to do. But there's still some inconsistencies here and there, and of course, this is probably one of his 2 best seasons he's played in his career. But he has had a rough history up and down from there on out. So he still has a little bit to prove with his ability to be consistent in that play. $44 million is quite a lot of money. I understand, because a lot of fans talk about the Geno Smith deal and they'd love that 25, 27. But Baker's a lot younger than Geno Smith is at this stage in his football career. And he's going to want more than that, especially with, like we mentioned, the Daniel Jones deal existing. So 44, I think, is ludicrous. I think if it were me, I would want anywhere from 30 to 34, maybe, would be something I'd target. He's going to want to be on the high end of that, obviously. And some people like Diana Rossini said he's not going to take a discount on it, but it'll be interesting to see where that number falls, because what Baker Mayfield sees in Baker Mayfield, what the Bucs see in Baker Mayfield, can obviously be 2 different things. Both like each other. I think Baker loves the organization in Tampa. The Bucs like the play that he was able to deliver them last year. But it's a matter of if he can keep doing that consistently, and if he can improve on some of the things that he needed to improve on going forward. And I would not like to spend $44 million to find out.
No, I'm in that camp with you. There's a few things about Baker that kind of jump out to me. First off, as you mentioned, one of his 2 of his best seasons he's ever had. When you go back to that
2020 was really good too.
2020 season, the following season, he kind of started to fall apart. He had the shoulder injury. Yeah. I think he had an ankle injury. He started to get in these bumps and bruises. And I think part of that is, I don't want to speak on it, fully on it, but if you look at 2020, it was a very long physical season for him. This past season, he was dealing with a lot of bumps and bruises. And one thing that would hesitate me from giving him, obviously a mega money deal, but like top of the, right on par, Matt Stafford, forget Daniel Jones, with a Matt Stafford, Dak Prescott, $40 million range deal, is what's his body going to look like this year?
Right.
are those issues going to pop up this season now that he's, been bumped? And he's a very physical quarterback. He's going to lower his shoulder. He's going to take hits. He's going to put himself into disadvantaged positions where he's getting sacked, not because of his O-line couldn't hold up, because he held the ball too long, couldn't get his first read, or just moved the pocket to in a spot where he's getting himself sacked. He's taking a lot of those this season. So that's one thing that I'm kind of worried about. On the flip hand, though, you look at what he did last season with the Bucs, and even talking with Coach Canales, that first half of the season, first 6-7 games, you got to remember he was splitting reps with Kyle Trask throughout the summer until that final preseason game where he was
competition.
So that level of same pageness, the being on the same page with everybody, the offensive line, the running back, the wide receivers, that still bled into the season. And really you kind of started to get into his swing. Same thing with the offensive line and the running game and everything like that. When Cohen's coming in and bringing a very similar system, just different terminology and things, the offensive line is not going to have to take that time to learn a whole new scheme. The wide receivers aren't going to take that time. Baker and the wide receivers, except for any new guys or whatever, and tight ends and running back, they all have this chemistry now, how he wants to play, except for a few spots, left guard, probably a 3rd/4th wide receiver coming in, maybe a tight end 2 upgrade over Payne Durham, backup running back. But like for the most part, the starters now have got all those reps. They're not missing out on half a month
right, because there's no
reps
competition.
So, that's one thing that could Baker have an even better season. So you got those two ends of the spectrum. There is, can Baker have an even better season, or does these bumps and bruises he took, they bleed into this season? So if I'm the Bucs, I'm really cautious on that. I don't want to give him top market. I'm not trying to give him Geno Smith money, because like you said, Geno Smith was a lot older than him. Geno Smith didn't really have suitors. Baker's already has 3 reported suitors in the Vikings, the Patriots, and Atlanta. If he hits the free agent market, he's going to have people who are going to pay him. I have him at $32.5 million, 3 years, 97. Bump it up to $108 million with incentives and stuff like that if you want to. So he cracks $100 million mark and he's happy about it. But I think that's a logical landing spot for him as far as salary. If you take the Geno Smith deal, you take the 44, it comes to 34.5. Maybe that's where you kind of are saying 34. You don't want to go with that, and he wants to be.
I think 32 would be great. I don't know if it's going to be 32. I we'll see what Baker's willing to sacrifice for, like he mentioned, after the Lions game. That was something that they'd have to do in free agency, and we'll see what the Bucs are willing to do. 32 to 34, I think, would be good business for what Baker Mayfield showed us. I think any more than 34, and you're pushing into some interesting territory there that I think would be unwise to explore with a guy like Baker Mayfield. But we'll see where it goes. It's one of the more interesting aspects of the offseason, because now that we have Mike Evans back, there's been a lot of different figures for this Baker Mayfield deal, a lot of different sides saying a lot of different things. So I think where it actually ends up could be a fun little point of curiosity whenever the deal happens. And I think it will. So
it definitely does. You got to think about it too. On the Bucs side, they both have some leverage here, right? Mike is back.
Right.
He's not going to want to play with Kyle Trask or some rookie quarterback. And if you don't get Baker back, and they are probably not going to be in the Kirk Cousins mix, you're looking at the bottom of the barrel, like Tannehill, Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew. Like that's what maybe you take a Bo Nix or a Mike Penn,
Justin Fields sweepstakes. Anybody? Yeah.
Maybe you get into Justin Fields, but I don't think they want to do that either. He's only got 1 year left on his deal. You're not going to pick up his 5th-year option, so you're really paying a 2nd or 3rd round pick for a 1-year guy who's had struggles and inconsistencies. So really, I mean, that plays into Baker's hand. But at the same time, the Bucs know Baker doesn't. He's how many times, River, did he mention he came here because of the stability of the franchise? There's a lot of stability here, even with a coaching change, right? They're in the middle of a coaching change.
Yes, absolutely.
Coordinator. And even afterwards, there's still a lot of stability there when they're moving to a new OC. So, and
he knows that the Bucs picked an OC for him.
Right,
too.
exactly.
So he knows that.
That's another thing that weighs into his side. But
Right.
what is in the Bucs side, the stability part, he's about to have a kid
Yep.
in April. And they're settled in Tampa. They love the Tampa area. One of the first things they did was get really involved in the charitable aspects of Tampa.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He doesn't want to be on his fifth team in 4 years. Or no, not even. It's like fourth team in 2 years, So like,
Yeah, he played for the Browns in that 2022 stretch. So
yeah. So I mean,
yeah,
he
very
doesn't
briefly.
want to
Yeah.
do that. He wants to plant his roots somewhere. And you start playing I'm going to hold out for an extra $2 million. Another thing, the three places that were mentioned all have state tax. Bucs don't.
Yeah.
You figure that in. So is it an ego thing or a money thing? Because we'll find out. If it is,
Absolutely.
if the Bucs, we find out if he goes somewhere else and find out the Bucs are offering 32 and some other team offered him 36, and you do the math and it equals out to the same, it's more about, this is what he's getting ego wise,
Right.
more than actual money part. And he's got chemistry and friendships on this team. Him and Tristan Wirfs are like best buds. They're having babies 2 weeks apart. So all those things kind of play in the Bucs' favor. While Baker obviously he knows about Liam. He knows he's got suitors out there.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this all unfolds. I still think they come to an agreement where
I do too.
both sides
I do
win.
too.
Somewhere right in the
too.
middle there.
I'm all for players getting their bag always. So
Yeah.
if there is a team out there that can give Baker Mayfield $44 million, I say go for it. I just
Yeah.
don't think there will be. And I think, like you said, he does really enjoy the environment here in Tampa Bay, his teammates, and that stability. And getting Liam Cohen for him was a big show of faith by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I expect him to be back.
So we talked about the big three. Obviously, Mike's done. Antoine's done for now. He's on the team. He's not going anywhere with the franchise.
Right.
I think they'll end up with a deal, and then Baker, who knows? But a lot of Bucs fans are impatient. They don't understand how these things work.
Yes.
And I keep getting asked, when's Levante going to sign? Are they going to sign XYZ? When are these guys going to get re-signed? And they don't really understand how situations work like this. But Levante David has openly spoke about him wanting to return and retire a Buccaneer. The Bucs said the same thing at the Combine, openly speaking about how he wants to return as a Buccaneer. It's a matter of time, right? Before these two teams come together. There's no urgency because it doesn't look like he's going to go somewhere else, although he did say he's going to keep his options open. I know you guys wrote about that. We wrote about that on his appearance on Good Morning Football.
Mm-hmm.
Is his options really open, or is just get the priorities done first, and then we'll get Levante in the building?
Well, remember, he did an interview with WDAE before that, and he said it was either be a Buck or retire.
Right.
And then after that on Good Morning Football, he said now he's keeping his options open. So
I
don't know if that was – I'm about to say this call from the agent came in there.
But on national TV now.
I think Levante is going to be a Buccaneer. I think we went through this last season. We know he got calls from a few teams. We know Buffalo was one of them, but a few other teams here and there. And he chose to stay with the Buccaneers. And I would expect him to do the same thing. He's been here for so long. He's a beloved franchise figure. And, of course, once you've been with a team for that long and you've got your roots in an area, it's hard to just pick up and go. And I think Levante obviously loves the organization here. The organization loves him back. I'd be shocked if he went anywhere else. I'm fairly certain he's going to be a Buccaneer.
Yeah, I think so. Winning the Super Bowl and going to the playoffs 4 straight years in a row definitely helps. I think he was still going through hell like he was in those early years. Maybe that wouldn't be the case, but I expect a bump in salary. Last year he made, I think, $5.5 million. This year, I think,
and he looked great last year, even at his age.
Incredible.
So
Incredible. So I think they bump him up a little bit this year, probably guarantee it all. Stretch it out though with some void years that they can to utilize and re-sign him next year. He's a year-to-year basis. I don't think he plays anywhere else. There's a couple other bigger guys. Chase McLaughlin's one of them.
Right.
We saw Kyer Fairbairn just sign a deal. I think today it was like
Texans.
With the Texans. I think it was $4 million. No, 4 years. I'll get you the number in a minute. But what do you think? Are they going to 3-year, $15.9 million? Averaging 5.3. I don't think McLaughlin sniffs that. He played on the veteran minimum last year, had a great season, made every one of his kicks until the Lions game, the 2 he did miss in the regular season were
We're
blocked. So,
blocked. Yes.
not necessarily your fault to an extent. Maybe you could have got a little higher arc on them, but also defenders got to do their part to not letting those guys through to block.
Yeah.
What do you think his market? What do you think his number comes in at? I've got him at 3-4-11. I think that's a sound 3.6 million. I don't think he sniffs the 5.3 million that Fairburn just got, but where do you think he's at?
I think you're right on the money there, pun intended. I think 3 or 4 would be good for him. And remember, not just a great season last year, but statistically the best season in Buccaneers history kicking.
True.
So that's a huge boon for the team. And having a kicker who can do that is invaluable to a team. That those 57-yarders, being able to hit those whenever he was asked to. And quite frankly, I think he should have been asked to do it more in certain situations. But he was able to hit those long kicks whenever he could. And like you said, only 2 misses were blocked. That type of thing, assuming he can continue that production next year, is so valuable to any offense. It opens up the field for scoring. It allows you to do different things in your playbook, knowing that you have a guy who you're confident can hit those long kicks. So I think McLaurin's underratedly almost kind of a guy they really should get back into the building, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and it's working just fine for him. So I think the Bucs will try and make an offer there and get something done.
All right, we'll jump into 2 other business priorities the Bucs need to take care of prior to next week, and then I just want to run through the rest of their free agents. Give me a yes or no and maybe a sentence about what you think they should do, whether re-sign or not. But they have 2 orders of business with the restricted tenders. Nick Leverett is one of them, kind of a utility player. He can play all 5 spots. Last year didn't play any games. The year prior, he started at left guard to end the season. Last year backed up Hainsey. I know he wasn't too thrilled with it because Jensen was out. You can't have your backup center playing left, starting at left guard, and then your center go down, and now you're changing 2 spots on the line.
Right.
So he got relegated to backup duties. And then D. Delaney, who is kind of their Swiss Army knife, can play inside, outside safety, whatever you kind of need him to do. But it's going to be 29. Their tender comes in around like $2.4 million. What are you doing with those guys if you're the Bucs? Are they sticking around on that tender, or are you non-tendering them and maybe trying to bring them back at a cheaper rate?
Leverett, I think, would be good to bring back on tender, because having guard depth or offensive line depth really in general is invaluable. And that's something that Jason Lights talked about quite frequently, just the depth in general. Mentioned it a little bit when he was talking about the combine. And their interior offensive line situation is volatile, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But any depth you can get there and retain for a guy who knows the system and the blocking schemes and whatnot, I think is very important. So I would imagine Leverett could be back there. Delaney, how old is Delaney?
29.
29. You might want to see if you can get him for a little cheaper, but Delaney plays teams quite a bit, and he's used to that sort of thing, and he's been a presence on the team for a while. And I think that sort of veteran presence is very important. So I wouldn't be opposed to it, but that with his age, like you mentioned, that might be something you want to consider trying to get another deal there.
Yeah, I think the Bucs decline both of them. I think it's too rich for their blood. I think Delaney's probably back, but Leverett, not. I think it's more about him wanting to find an opportunity to start.
Right, and that's true as well. He's going to want to do that. So
coming back up somebody. So, all right, let's fire down this list. I'll start with the big name on the list, Devin White. Is he back or not?
No, I would say not. I think the Devin White experiment has run its course in Tampa Bay. Great play in 2020, but honestly, since that 2020 playoff run, I don't think he's been near worth it. And from social media posts abound and other surrounding circumstances, I think they're going to move on from Devin White.
Yeah, I think so. I don't even think a 1 year, $4 or $5 million deals in the cards with Devin. I think it's time to move on from that chapter. Will Golston.
Yeah. Golston could be another type of, and he did this last year too, skipping training camp, waiting to sign, and then coming back at cheaper prices. both a really experienced depth player and someone who knows the system. So I could see him back, but he's getting up there, and we'll see what they do on the defensive line, because that's going to be a big point of emphasis, I think, coming up.
All right, we'll go through a trio of starters. Last year, we'll start with the split guards, Matt Filer and then Aaron Stinney. Matt Filer started the season, injury bumped him out of the lineup, and Stinney took over for him. Stinney had an up and down season, but was solid enough. What are you doing with those two guys?
Filer's gone, I think, for certain.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's a question. Stinney, like you mentioned, a lot of these guys, like Stinney and Leverett, could want to try their hand somewhere else.
Carolina jumps out to me, you know.
Right, exactly. The Canals connection there, and if they want to do that, that would be an opportunity for them to go. But if they're willing to stay, again, Light's going to want that depth. The team's going to want that depth, especially with how murky the interior offensive line situation has gotten. So, and part of that's probably Violet will be released. That's probably contributing to that a little bit. But we'll see. Right now, I'll say no right now. I think he might get some looks outside some other places, but you never know. And I think the Bucs might try and fight to keep him back and see if he can be a rotational guy.
All right, another starter who kind of fell out of favor after posting an insane clip per PFF the season prior. Ryan Neal. I think that experiment's over too. Your thoughts?
100%. Yeah.
See you later. Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah. Neal, it was a good signing when it happened, I think.
Sounded like,
but it didn't turn out well. Coverage was quite bad. Shout out to him for filling in at linebacker against the first Panthers game due to massive injuries. A lot of fun to watch, and he did a pretty decent job given the circumstances. But yeah, I think he'll try and find somewhere else to try and reclaim that magic from 2 years ago, because it did not show up in Tampa Bay.
All right. So far I've had all these guys is not coming back myself, but two more. David Moore kind of stepped up when Raheem Jarrett went down, and then Cam Gill, outside linebacker.
I like Cam Gill, and I think you got guys like Marquise Watts coming in too, so there's some depth there already. But I think Cam's done a pretty damn good job when he's asked to play, and he also plays team. So I would, as long as he's okay in that role. Again, if he wants to try and go somewhere else to get more play time, that's one thing. But I think the Bucs will want to bring him back. Who was the other player you mentioned?
David Moore, wide receiver.
Oh yeah, Moore I think might go somewhere else, especially because that's a guy that that's another guy that Canals could look at as an experienced receiver in his system. So I would say no, probably not. Especially with Trey Palmer had an up and down season for sure, fumbled a lot, made some mistakes here and there, but I actually was fairly impressed with a lot of his trajectory going forward and his speed. So I think he'll take a more active role. And so I think the need for more would be out on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Palmer fits in nicely as a 3-4, rotating, ideally you don't really have a wide receiver 3. You've got two guys that can rotate into that role. Depending on what you need, slot, inside type of guys. So there's a few guys in free agency that I think could fit the bill. I had Cam Gill not coming back just because I think they want to see what they got in Jose Ramirez. I think he brings a similar speed.
That's true as well. Yep.
They really liked what he did on the practice squad last year, and I think he can take Cam Gill's spot. But also, I think he can be a better pass rusher as him. Moving on to a couple of other guys. These are some of the guys that I have the Bucs bringing back. But John Wolford, I think that's that's a layup, honestly, with his experience with Liam. Liam's mentioned him a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And he actively decided not to join the Rams or another team, which had no quarterback at the time, and he would have been the starting guy.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll bring Wolford back. Having him on the 53 is a little rough, which happened last year because of that situation. That was the stipulation involved to get him that money. Ideally, they wouldn't want that, I don't think, but he can play as an emergency quarterback like a lot of other teams have utilized, so there's also a value there. And he knows the Cohen system very well, and Baker Mayfield likes it when they've worked together in Los Angeles. I'm excited to be back. Yeah.
I'm gonna drop a little something here, I think, and as a former
really?
Gator coverer, you've got intense knowledge about this guy in this situation. I would not be surprised, instead of having him sign on the 53-man roster, if they drafted a quarterback late in this draft or picked one up on undrafted free agency, maybe a Devin Leary, Kentucky, worked with Cohen, maybe grab him at the end of the 7th round and flat out release Kyle Trask and just kept John Wolford as a number 2 and a guy like Leary on the practice squad. There's no allegiance to Kyle Trask in his final year of his deal with Cohen. And I think, if he wants to get just 2 quarterbacks on the roster, he's going to trust a guy like Wolford way more than he's going to trust Kyle Trask. So, obviously in the interest in Wolford too, teams wanted him to come in and potentially be a starter. It's something he's done in his career, something that Trask hasn't done in his career. If something happens to Baker, so might be a bit of a hot take, but that's where I'm going with that.
I don't think that's a hot take at all. Really, I love Kyle. Kyle's cool. I covered him in 2020.
Happy birthday, Kyle, too. So
is his birthday today?
Today it won't be when you're watching this, but yesterday it was. But today,
right? Yeah,
for you
absolutely.
watching.
I love Kyle. I don't know if the Bucs are too high on Kyle, and I think if they were, we would have seen some more opportunities come his way than we have gotten. And he did compete for the starting job, obviously, and they liked him enough for that. But Wolford's experience, Baker's experience, I think they like that at the quarterback position. And like you said, I think it's definitely a possibility that they want him on the 53, want Wolford on the 53. And if that's the case, then having a guy like Kyle Trask there wouldn't make a lot of sense. So we could indeed see something like that happen.
From quarterback to running back, Chase Edmonds, he gave the Bucs a bit of a spark when he was healthy, but the big key word there was when. Is that a guy who actively sought out the Bucs last year to sign with them, also the year prior, but they brought Leonard Fournette back. Is he a guy that you think they bring back?
I'm going to say no. I don't know if that's a little spicy or not, but I thought Edmonds did a pretty damn good job when he was healthy, like we mentioned. He did a lot of good things, but you have the draft this year. You have some running backs floating around there that you might like. I think getting younger at that position, which they've tried to do with guys like Sean Tucker, but I think getting an RB2 who also could fit a different archetype than Rachaad White, right? Maybe a guy that's a little bit more powerful to use on third down, a different build type, I think would be beneficial. What did you say?
I said Isaiah Davis, South Dakota State in the draft.
Oh, right. You go a lot of ways with that, and I think that would be a good thing to do. So I'm going to say no. I like what Jace did, and if he can stay healthy, I would not be opposed at all to bringing him back, but I think they might try and go younger and try and get a little bit of a mix-up in the backfield to have some different points of attack.
Yeah, I think they bring him back, but I also think they hit the draft too. I mean, they carried 4 running backs for a large part of the season until Keyshawn. Then they just carried 3, but really it was only 2 because Tucker was inactive. But I think they go away with the draft. But I think it's one of those things that you can sign him, and then if you've got to cut him, you don't feel terrible about it. If they make a splash, I do like a guy like AJ Dillon to bring. I think he'd be a nice little thunder and lightning type deal with Rachaad White. Pat O'Connor seems like he's been on the Bucs forever. Special teams ace, rotational guy, loves Tampa, huge guy on the team with a lot of the players. He's actually on vacation with Vea and Sue right now down in Antigua. I think it is down in the Caribbean. You think he's back?
Yes. Teams, guys like that, I think are super invaluable. And of course, he didn't initially make the 53 last year, but they brought him back, and I think they'll do something similar. But I think he'll be wearing a Buccaneers uniform and he'll get his playing time.
Yeah, I mean, at least on the practice squad, and then if not brought up like he was last year. Greg Gaines.
Greg Gaines is interesting. It depends on where the market is for Greg Gaines. I thought he was a solid rotational piece in the defensive line, which is looking pretty decent. I don't know. You can go with a younger drafted player. You could bring him back. I think I mentioned in some articles before that maybe there's a possibility they might move on, but right now I'll say yes because I think it's good to have that depth there, and he has played in the system. So if they can get him back at a reasonable rate, I think it'll be a good idea.
And he's played with Liam in the Rams. And there's
That's
one of the
true.
things that jumped out to me when Liam was being introduced and everything. Greg was in the building, and the season was by then over. What 3 weeks?
Yeah, a few weeks. Yep.
So he's a free agent. What is he doing there? But just Mike Green's the only guy on the roster other than like C.J. Brewer and Eric Banks and some guy that I can't pronounce his name yet that was in CFL last year. Lawal Uguak, I think. I don't know. But there's nobody depth. You've got Hall, you've got Cansey, you got Vea, and then you got Mike Green, who ended the year in IR. He seems to be healthy going into next year, but still hasn't proven anything in the league. So I think you need to bring good veteran depth back there. We talked about Pat O'Connor maybe being the practice squad. I think you can bring Greg back. Still you get someone in the draft and maybe even bring in somebody else in free agency if you wanted to. Last couple offensive linemen. One's a long snapper. One's a swing tackle. Justin School and Zach Triner.
I think they like Triner quite a bit. Remember there was a time when Triner had a little bit of an injury that was bothering him, and they ended up bringing in Evan Deckers in the practice squad to try and see if he'd be needed, and Triner played anyway. So I think he's definitely done a good job there, and they'll keep him. And I think School for a swing tackle has done his job, pretty solidly. So I think that's another one they could bring back as well. It should be cheap as well. So
yeah. All right, we talked about the Bucs because this is my last podcast before free agency. So we covered the big names. We covered the smaller names on the roster. Now we're gonna jump into something. I asked River prior to coming on the show to bring me 3 free agents that he thought could be on the Bucs roster. Could be value guys, could be splash guys. I have no idea who he's got. I'll let him go first, but I've got 3 of my own that I think the Bucs might target. Obviously, we know their positions of need: edge rusher 1, starting left guard, starting safety. They could use an RB2, tight end 2, wide receivers 3/4, all those positions. Starting linebacker if they're not comfortable with KJ Davis. Do they trade Carlton Davis? That's a good question to jump into real quick. Do they trade Carlton Davis? Do they cut Carlton Davis, open up that, or is he sticking around on this team, you think?
I've thought about this. I've been leaning towards stick around for the moment, but it wouldn't shock me. I think if they tried to move on. Davis at his best, I think has been a very good corner. In fact, I think at the top of his game, he's been the best corner on the team, but he hasn't played I don't think he's played a full season in his career, has he? No. Nope. That's a problem. And last year it seemed like Dean would get hurt, and then a few weeks later Davis would get hurt, and Dean would get hurt, and then Davis would get hurt. So that's no way to play. And if you think that you don't want to rely on that sort of thing and you can try and get anything for him, it might be a good idea. So I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, last year of his deal, I think you could get a 3rd-round pick if he signs somewhere in a big money deal. I don't know if he's going to get a big money deal, so you're probably looking at something like a 5th, maybe a 4th-round pick. But, you look at last year, he only played in 12 games, started all of them. But you look at the biggest thing that jumps out to me, sure, he's got 73 pass deflections, but in his 6 years with the Bucs, only 9 interceptions, only 2 of those seasons he's had double-digit interceptions.
He is a great cover corner. He's a great cover corner. It is astonishing how often he drops interceptions. I mean,
it's crazy.
Hitting him in the hands, just in any situation. And I know, obviously, it's not easy, but the easy ones you'll see he will drop. So that is something.
The thing is, he doesn't even make the hard ones too. You're like some guys will make the hard ones. You never. It's such a high variance. And the thing too about him is, he's covered, as you said, some of the best wide receivers in the game. Devontae Adams, Julio Jones, all in their prime.
Jamar Chase is the toughest corner he's ever going against. So
Jamar Chase. So he has done his job. Jay Jetta last season. He's done his job as far as coverage. The problem with him is that's all he can do. When he gets put into zone coverage, he gets lost, he gets beat, and he's not going to be a playmaker for you. So I think they move on from him. I think late 3rd, early 4th is something they can have. Look for a team like the Chargers, potentially to go out. Maybe the Raiders, the Ravens. We'll see if they move on from him. But again, we talked about we're going to bring in 3 free agents. Well, cornerback 1 could be a spot if they don't feel like Zion's ready. So We'll start with you. Give me your first free agent. Who do you think the Bucs should target? Who do you think who would you target? Either moderate signing, splash signing. What do you got?
I don't think I have any splash signings on this list, and I wanted to look at needs, and I think two biggest are interior offensive line and edge rusher. I don't have any edge rushers on this list because those tend to be expensive. But first one, and I actually mentioned this on a Bucs Wire article that I wrote a few weeks ago, but Dalton Risner with Minnesota.
Yep.
Used to play for Denver. Currently, I think he signed a 1-year, $3 million deal with Minnesota last year, and he was pretty solid last year. And he's a free agent once again. Could get a little bit more than that, but if you need a guard, and again, they tried this with Filer, so I understand if there might be some hesitation there of getting a veteran guard for cheap. But if you need someone that you can plug in there, you'd still need to get a center in the draft, but. He might be a pretty good option for them at a low cost that they can just get a veteran who's played some good guard play, right in there. So that was my first pick.
Yeah, I think obviously guard, I think, is a big one. Center is a tricky one to me because do they roll the dice with Hainsey for one more year? He didn't look terrible towards the end of the season once he got his feet under him and more comfortable in the system, but guard was an issue, and Stinney provided a boost. But I don't know if he provided a boost, the Filer was just that bad that it looked like a boost, but she started to break down too at the end of the season.
Sure.
One thing I like about Reisner a lot is he's a mauler in the run game. Like, he's really good in the run game. He can struggle in the pass game some, but with a guy like Trisha next to you, I think you can cover up some of those deficiencies. So I do like that one. I'm going to go with my first one, a big splash right out of the way. I'm going to go. I think the one thing that this Bucs team needs more than anything else is an edge rusher. Josh Allen, Brian Burns, Daniil Hunter, those guys aren't coming anywhere near here. You look in the draft, I don't think Jared Verse, Latte Latu is going to fall. Chop Robinson's got a lot of questions. He's got the athleticism, 4.4 speed, but there's a lot of questions about his production history and can he be the guy? After that, Braylon Trice, Chris Braswell, Adiza, Adiza Isaac, I don't think any of those guys you bring in here and replace Shaq Barrett. And at that point, I'd rather just bring Shaq Barrett for like a $5 million deal and figure it out next season. But I think the way the Bucs are going to structure these things, and with the Evans deal, the way they structured that, they're preparing themselves to make a small splash, as well as some value guys. And I think Bryce Huff would make a ton of sense here. He's 27 years old. He's been a situational pass rusher. He's not great at defending the edge as a run setter, but I think if you've got him out there and his job is to get home, he's shown he can. He's got a pass win rush rate that, screams, right up there next to a guy like LT, and that's high praise. Yeah. But that's something that he's been able to do. Now, the Jets didn't trust him enough to play in a full-time role. So there's question marks around there. And they obviously spent 2 first rounds back-to-back with Jermaine Johnson. Yeah. Jermaine Johnson and then Will McDonald. And didn't give him that opportunity. But I think he's a guy that you could get, somewhere around 4 years, $64 million. You're not going to break the bank necessarily for him. He's in that next tier of edge rushers. That I think would make a lot of sense. If not him, then maybe a guy like Uche or Van Ginkel or something like that down the line. On a 1 or 2 year deal. But I like Bryce Huff. I think he'd be a heck of an addition to this team and a heck of an option to have across from Yaya Diaby starting on the other side.
Yeah, anytime. I mean, he had 10 sacks last season, didn't he? Double digits. And anytime you can get a double-digit guy in there, that's great. And the Bucs haven't had a 10-sack guy since I think Shaq Barrett was the last one to do it. Wasn't he? Yeah. A few years ago. So, yeah, that's a long time. So, getting a guy like that in there would be pretty valuable at the end. And if you can get him for a decent deal, I'd be all for it. And edge rusher is like I said, one of my 2 big holes for the Bucs. That and interior offensive line, and they could address one of those in free agency. That'd be a big get for them. So, absolutely.
All right, you're up with your second guy.
I thought about safety. And the reason why I thought about safety is because Jordan Poyer got released today. He's not my guy. But
safety market is so deep, bro.
It is. But I thought about someone who's been with the Bucs before. A lot of people have been saying this. But Jordan Whitehead, I think, would be a decent little pull, particularly because I like what he does in the run game. I like his run defense skills. Ryan Neal, struggled in coverage. I'm not sure if he provided, a lot of really great stuff in the run game. I think a guy like Whitehead could do that. And Whitehead, granted, I think 3 of them were in the same game. But he had 4 picks last year. And he's shown the athleticism to be able to do that. And he has a problem sometimes. He doesn't wrap up with his hits, and he tries to go for the big pop. But I think he's a valuable player with a valuable skill set, and he could pair along nicely with Antoine in a system that he already knows. So I don't think it should be that expensive. But sorry to Jets fans, by the way. We've named 2 Jets right off the bat. I think though, and Mike Edwards is a free agent as well. But I think I'd rather, if I had to pick between the 2, I like Whitehead.
Yeah, returning Bucs, I'm with you on Whitehead. There's so many guys, though. Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde.
Yep.
Jeremy Chin is a guy who I really like. He can play that hybrid nickel linebacker. I think Bulls would have a lot of fun scheming him up. This safety class is unbelievably deep this year. Jonathan Owens played a bunch of snaps for the Packers. And I'm leaving off some high name guys. I just can't because they're so deep. Safety is such a good group. I considered putting Jeremy Chin on this list for this one. I do have him in my mock coming up. But I decided to go on a different route. I decided to go to the offensive side. I feel like you did one offense, one defense. I did one defense. I'm going to the offensive side, and I'm going to go with Josh Reynolds, the wide receiver from the Lions. The Bucs need a third, fourth guy. They need a guy who can be reliable on 3rd down, 4th down. They need a guy who, has tendencies to make a big play, who's hard to tough down, and a guy who isn't afraid to get his nose dirty in the run block. It's no block, no rock type mentality in Liam Cohen's offense and this Sean McVay's kind of offense. You see Cooper Kupp getting his nose dirty all the time. Godwin's one of the best blockers. Mike's not afraid to do it, and I think that's the attitude culture. Trey Palmer's not afraid to do it, although he needs to learn how to let his guy go.
Had a few issues with that.
Quite a few holding calls last season, but Josh Reynolds is one of the best in the game. He can play inside, outside. And one thing, too, is he's got familiarity with Liam Cohen in that Sean McVay system. Liam Cohen was actually his wide receiver coach for 2 years when he was with the Rams. So I think he's a good guy to get. I think he'll be cheap too, $11 million over 2 years. You can get that cap hit number down to $3 million, so you can still, have some money to spend and make a couple of the small mid-tier signings. But wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. I don't know. Do you have any wide receivers on your list?
I do not have any wide receivers on my list. I have another defensive player for my last one. So
okay. So another guy I like too, KJ Osborne. I think he'd be, and I put him on my list of potential Bucs free agent targets. KJ Osborne's another that 3-4 guy who was thrown into a starting role when Jay Jetta and Addison were both out last year. Yeah. So I mean, he was de facto wide receiver 1. There was some drops last year, but I think to get him in 3-4 guy, and to have him, potentially making, $5 million is a good get. And if they want to spend a little money, Curtis Samuel's an intriguing option. He can play the slot outside, and they can use him in the run games. Guy's got over 700 rushing yards in his career. So there's another guy I think.
They did love using him on the sweeps. So
yes, you already got up on the Madden team.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, your last free agent, then we'll get to mine, then we'll wrap up the show and get on out of here.
Yeah, I thought about this, and this player is quite injury prone, so that might be something to take a look at. But I also said this because I like KJ Britt at linebacker. I thought he did a pretty good job filling in for Devin White. And Anthony Walker Jr. with Cleveland's a free agent. Okay. And I think he's had some pretty damn good linebacker play when he's healthy. He has struggled with that over this past 3 years. But if you got a guy that you already like KJ Britt, which I think the Bucs do, and I think he did a pretty good job there. Devin White's probably not going to be back. I think a guy like him, where you could rotate them, or B, bring in a strong veteran presence that's plays some good football, especially in coverage, which I think a Tom Bull system kind of demands that out of his linebackers. I think it wouldn't be a bad pickup if you can get him for cheap. But like I mentioned, the one thing to look out for is I think he had a knee injury last year. He's torn his quad, so that's he's got a history there. But if you make him rotational, perhaps, and if not, if you just want to put him out there and you like what you have in Britt just in case, and you want that strong veteran presence, I think it wouldn't be a bad sign.
Okay. You know what the funny thing is? I'm also ending with the linebacker, But unlike you, I'm ending with a starting linebacker that can plug and play. A guy who was really flown under the radar, and I think should probably be talked about a little bit more. Mina Kimes, she's on the same wavelength as me. She tweeted out a video of her talking about him. If you guys know me, follow me. I've been vocal about him on socials. But Blake Cashman from the Texans.
Yeah.
I really love the way this kid plays. He came on late. He's kind of an ascending player, but last year he really kind of tore the roof off. He's a guy who can he can play in coverage. He can play on the line. He's got, good speed to him, good instincts to him. He can make he can make the turnover. Last year he had an interception and a fumble recovery. He's kind of a do-it-all and a guy that you can put right next to Levante David and know he's not going to be out of place. He got 106 tackles last year, 3 quarterback hits, 9 tackles for loss. He had 2 sacks on the season as well after putting up 3 sacks last year. This year he started 13 games for the team. He had a couple injuries that he missed a couple games, but active in coverage with that interception and 5 pass deflections. He graded out as the 4th best linebacker in coverage last season. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's only going to cost somewhere around $9-10 million on a 2-year deal. I think that's a steal for what he can bring, especially when you're probably going to pay Levante around 7. Not that Levante doesn't deserve it, but if you can get a guy at nearly half of that price, I think you're doing really well in that position. But linebacker is another one, just like safety, is really deep class. If you look at it, a guy who's just released, Jerome Baker, Josie Jewell's out there. Jordan Brooks is another
a lot of good stuff. Yeah. Absolutely.
So there's a lot of good linebackers there that they could kind of, if they don't feel like the answer's on the roster with KJ Britt, because he's really just a 2-down thumper. And, they spent the 5th round pick last year on Savassi Dennis, but you don't really know. You got a glimpse of what he can do in that Colts game where he started. But is he going to be the 3rd down answer if Britt's on the field for 1st and 2nd down? I think there's some question marks there. And this draft isn't really deep either at the position.
Yeah, linebacker will be interesting because, again, how much they like KJ Britt will be a matter to talk about. But like you said, if you can bring a guy in like that, like Cashman, or experienced guy like Walker who could get in there and play, it's valuable for sure. And the Todd Bowles system with how he likes his his linebackers drop back in coverage, sometimes poke in the gaps, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen Levante at practice line up the defensive lineman to learn some blitz packages.
The games we've seen it.
Right, exactly. So I think Todd Bowles system demands a lot of his linebackers, and getting a guy who can do a lot is important. So even though Britt's been with the team, he spent the system, and I think he did do some good things in relief for Devin White last year. Bringing in a veteran might be a good idea. So interesting to see where they go with that. Yeah.
Yes, especially last year of his contract too as well. Bowles is crazy.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, I remember last year, I forget what game it was, but he had Kalijah Cansey and Anthony Nelson lined up as inside linebackers. I was like, what is this man doing right now? He's insane.
The Bears game, there was a few crazy looks that Fields got. And I mean, Fields obviously looked like a fish out of water in that game, as he has done in a few others. But the looks he was getting from Bowles were insane. And some of the Viking stuff, too. I think that Cansey stunt inside got a lot of coverage on Twitter when that happened, when he kicked in and rushed the passer. Yes, a lot of great stuff. So
yeah, Bowles is good. Getting him guys who can do that kind of stuff and disguise and be able to play and drop in coverage, blitz the gaps, but still hold their own up against the run defense is huge and something that he likes to do. But so there you guys have it. Free agency kind of preview there. Talked about the contracts. Talked about what was going on. Mike Evans is going to speak this Friday. Me and River will be there to cover that. So make sure you're tuning in to Bucs Game Day. Our personal Twitters, and obviously we'll have content out of that afterwards. My free agency, top free agents is going right through here, right up until free agency. So you can follow along with that. I should have my mock done by Friday. It's a nice 2,000 words for River to edit and go over.
I'm ready. That's what I'm here for.
Ready for that. But other than that, you guys know you can find me at JC Allen on NFL, JC Allen NFL on Twitter, X, right here on the Sick Podcast Network. River, go ahead and promote yourself. Where can they find you? Again, welcome to the team, man. So happy to have you on here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be on with Bucs Game Day. A lot of great people here. Like I mentioned, a lot of great people, Bucs Wire, but I'm ready for this new opportunity. I will be found at River H. Wells on Twitter or X, however you'd like to prefer it. I prefer Twitter. And you can go to Bucs Game Day, and I'll be writing articles there. As JC mentioned, I will be editing his articles. I'm ready to join the team and get to work. So can't wait to continue my Bucs coverage, and I'll be there Friday when Mike speaks with you, and we'll bring you guys the best coverage we can bring.
Awesome.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. Yeah.
So excited for it, especially when the season rolls around. Before we get out of here, River, I want you to let the Bucs fans, if they're not familiar with you, who you are, which you should be, but if you're not, give them 3 things about you that they might not know, that they might not find on your social media page, or what if they can.
Oh boy, this is like on the spot. This is like in high school, like the icebreakers. Yeah,
icebreakers. 3 things.
Yeah,
Hobbies,
I was
interests,
a Bucs
whatever.
Wire before this. Yeah. My first thing, I'm a guitarist and musician. In fact, I'm playing a gig coming up on Saturday, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, it's in Treasure Island. If anyone's in Treasure Island, yeah. What type of guitar you got there?
It's Ibanez.
Oh, sweet, love Ibanez. Yeah, so I'm a musician. I play. I got my guitars up here, so that's a big hobby of mine. My first memory was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2003 Super Bowl parade. I was 3 or 4, and I remember being in a park during the parade in Tampa, and that's my very first memory as far back as I can recall.
That's awesome.
So I've been a Bucs fan for my whole life, and being able to cover this team, with you guys is definitely impressive. So, a third fact. Oh boy, a third fact. The third facts are always the hardest.
They are.
Experience.
Give them the first 2 easy, and then you're like, crap.
Sure. I'll go with the recent one. I saw Dune 2 in theaters on Sunday. It's one of my favorite movies I've ever seen. So I would highly recommend going out there and seeing it. Watch the first one. Watch it in IMAX. Whatever. Fantastic experience. So.
Do I need to see the original Dune before I see Dune 1, or can I see Dune 1 and then Dune 2?
No, you don't need to watch the one from the 1980s. You can just watch the first Dune and the second. It's on the same book. Would highly recommend it though. It's an incredible experience. I guess a fun fact's not me paying for a ticket to watch a movie, but great movie.
So we got a theater sneaker in there. No. That's the one with Timothée Chalamet, right?
Yes, it is. He's fantastic. Everyone's fantastic, but he's fantastic. Yeah.
Now, they did a spin-off with Vin Diesel, right? Is that based off the same Pitch Black or something like that?
I don't believe so. I believe the Riddick movies are not. If you like
the Riddick, Chronicles of Riddick.
Movies. Yeah, Pitch Black was the first one. Those are good movies. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I figured something there. I also saw, too, something I didn't know when I went to your page just to see if you post something already. You're a big F1 guy, right?
I am a big F1 guy. Yes, that's true. Yes, absolutely. Okay. My favorite driver, Yuki Tsunoda, who didn't have a good moment in Bahrain, so rough trying to be a Yuki fan. But Yuki and the Red Bulls, I like Max Verstappen a lot, but I also like Lewis Hamilton. So 2021 was just a lot of fun for me. But hopefully the season's more competitive because it's been bad the past few years, but a lot of off the track drama. So
are you going to get into the boat racing the new boat racing league that Brady opened up?
Oh, I haven't, but I actually saw a clip of it. And it's really cool. He also owns or doesn't own, but he also sponsors I think an endurance racing team. He had the Brady brand ad on a team at Le Mans, so he's getting into that sphere, which is really, really cool to see.
He's just spreading his wings everywhere. Owner of part owner of the Raiders, part owner of boating
businessman,
soccer team. He's everywhere right now.
Birmingham City,
trying to get those billions up so he can buy a franchise himself, I think. But River, it's been an awesome time with you today. Obviously, getting to know you a little bit more, breaking down this Bucs team free agency right around the corner. We'll be back next Wednesday on here, and we'll be in full swing. Free agency will have already started for what it starts next Wednesday, right? The 13th, I believe. So let me double check. Yes,
I think the 11th is what's the legal tampering period?
Tampering starts on the 11th.
Is it 11th? Yeah.
Don't agree to the contracts, but you can. And then we're like, as soon as 4:00 hits on Wednesday, we get like 5 deals that come through. Like, you guys negotiated that really quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think last year we saw them trickle in slower because like they're getting like, hey, can't be doing that. We all know what happened there. But yeah, when we're live on Wednesday here, I'll be spewing out hopefully deals for the Bucs, deals around the league, and we'll jump into that. What happened? Why they couldn't reach a deal with Baker Mayfield before he was in free agency, or maybe he does reach a deal. Who knows? Who knows where we're going to be next Wednesday?
There's still a few days left. So
talking about free agency, right? So, again, for River, thank you so much for being here. For myself here, JC Allen at the Sick Podcast Network, brought to you on Pirate Parlay, brought to you by the Sick Podcast Network. We're going to get out of here. We'll be back next week, and I'll talk to you guys then. Peace.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Pirate Parlay on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.